Welcome to the Museum of Southern History. We're located in Sugar Land, Texas, behind the Southern National Bank, which is a replica of Thomas Jefferson's home, Monticello. I'm Carrington Weems, president of the museum, and I'm here today to tell you about an exhibit that we have here, which is entitled Origins and Influence, 5 Centuries of Shipping and Mapping. This exhibit is formed from a collection that we have loaned to the museum, my wife and myself. Let's talk about this first section here, which is entitled First Printed Maps of the New World Discovery. The first map that was ever printed having the name of America on it is at the far right of these 3 maps on the wall here. This middle map here was made by Martin Wassermuller in 1525, and he finally recognized Christopher Columbus on that map, because prior to that, on the earlier map that he did of 1507, he only was acquainted with Amerigo Vespucci, and so our country is named America after Amerigo, who is a friend of the map maker, who made 1,000 copies of the map, and they were dispersed widely through Europe, and the name caught, and that's why we're America and not Columbia. This is the Santa Maria, of course, and then these are 2 delineations of the Gulf of Mexico, very early, 1548, 1561. First, the Gastaldi, and you can see the outline of the Gulf is very accurate. It's also very accurate in the Russelli map, showing Yucatan Peninsula in Florida, and of course the Mississippi and other rivers in Texas. These maps in this entire exhibit are all original maps, and they were printed back in the 16th century, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. In this case here, we have a couple of models, and we have a binnacle here, typical of an earlier day. This globe here is the Beheim globe that doesn't show the Western Hemisphere, but it's the globe that Columbus had, and it showed that Europe was 2,400 miles from Japan. And of course we know it's more like 10,900 miles. And so that's why Columbus was so far off in his thinking about getting to the Far East by the western route. However, we're lucky that he was that far off. In this section of the Austin Room, we are trying to demonstrate the 18th century French claims over lands that became Texas. In each of these maps, done by French cartographers, the claims are clearly visible in that France was claiming all of the land during this period of time in the 18th century that has now become Texas. And over here, on this wall, we have Spain and Mexico emerging as the dominant landlords of Texas. So these maps begin to show the Spanish claims over Texas, lands that were Texas, became Texas, and the Spanish became less complacent because they were threatened by the French, who were also trying to claim lands that became Texas. The maps on this wall in the Austin Room depict the birth of Texas, Texas being born, from the Humboldt map here in the bottom center of 1811 to the Augustus Mitchell map here in 1848. It shows the various boundary configurations of Texas as it was becoming an independent nation and later a state. Over here we have some nice delineations of the Gulf Coast as well as Galveston Bay and Trinity Bay, of course, before the ship channel, and of course Texas in its virtually in its final form as we know it today. In this wall in the Austin Room, we have two bird's-eye views, early bird's-eye views of Galveston. One depicts the November 1885 fire very accurately as it spread across the city of Galveston. The other view is of the wharf area as well as the city of Galveston, depicting the old Bayshore Hotel and the Cotton Port and other views of Galveston, and then that's just a contemporary view of that time at sea. And over here we have several Confederate encounters. The Battle of Sabine Pass on the bottom here, which is a picture of the Sachem in terms of Dick Dowling's great feat during the Civil War there at Sabine Pass. Over here we have the model of the Alabama done from the plans that came from the Smithsonian in 8 different kinds of wood. This is an exceptional model of the Alabama. The Confederate States Raider of the Alabama sunk 62 Union vessels in the Civil War, and above the Alabama is a print of the beginning of the battle between the Alabama and the Kearsarge, which resulted in the Alabama being sunk. Captain Raphael Semmes was saved and taken to England and later became an admiral in the Confederate Navy. This is a model of our most famous Texan, the mighty T, the battleship Texas, and we believe this model is the direct reflection of the refurbishment that the Texas had in 1934. It supposedly came out of FDR's museum at Hyde Park, and it has a teak deck, and we don't know of any other model like it, and there's only one other model I know of the Texas, and that's in Austin with the large flume stacks. This is a sectional view of the battleship Texas, and it's directly behind this 1/16 scale model, and it is an absolute reflection of the model itself. Over here we have the famous De Cordova map of Texas, and you'll notice that Sam Houston has signed off on this particular map, and many other important Texans. You'll want to look at that map carefully. We're now moving into the Texas room for another part of the exhibit. And these two items here, this print that was printed in 1775, depicts the movement of the entire fleet of King Henry VIII, who is right here on this ship, going across the English Channel to meet with the French King Francis I to sign the Treaty of Calais. And you'll see here that he's brought his noblemen, his bishops, and all of the important ingredients of a trip of that sort in the entire British fleet. They had peace for many years thereafter. They had had hostilities for 100 years prior to this treaty. Below here is a model of the Sovereign of the Seas, a supership built by Charles I in 1637 with his architect Phineas Pett. It was the first important British warship of its size, a ship of the line, and the model is typical of the Admiralty-style models of the day. The ship had a long life. It was not particularly successful in battle, but it did its job, and unfortunately it burned to the water's edge because somebody left a candle aboard that turned over, and the ship burned. The Sovereign of the Seas, one of the early great fleet ships of the British. And these early British ships influenced our young fledgling Navy, which is depicted in the section over here entitled The American Frigates. This is the American Frigates section, depicting the model of the Boston, model of the Essex, and model of the Philadelphia. These frigates were all built at the turn of the century, 1799, 1800, and were the first warships of the American Navy. They were generally built by the city whose name they bear, and the money came from contributions from the citizens of those cities. And these three ships were all involved in the war with Tripoli. Tripoli, the Barbary pirates and so forth, the Pasha gave America a lot of trouble at that time, 1803, 1805. And all three ships were involved in that bombardment and continuous patrolling and battling there. And the Philadelphia over here ran aground near Tripoli, and the captain could not get the ship off the shoal, and so they abandoned ship. The Tripoli picked it up, brought it over into their harbor, and trained the guns against us. So Stephen Decatur and a crew of valiant men at night went in there, had a battle aboard the Philadelphia, won the battle, and they set explosives and scuttled the ship. That was the end of the Philadelphia, unfortunately. The Essex was very active in the War of 1812 and was a very prominent and important ship, much like the Constitution. The maps you see here are also very important maps which you should have a close look at. This is the John Speed of America, and just to my left is the Blau map, the Dutch map of America, and these maps you can see are somewhat similar. This map over here is a Hondius above the Philadelphia, a very beautiful map, said to be the most beautiful map ever made of America, depicting ships, and the cartouche also reflects Indian life on the continent. These five maps are 16th century maps of the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific Ocean, and this map here is the first map of our region depicting particularly the Southwest and the Gulf, and of course the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, Panama. And this map is the first map. These are both Ortelius, Abraham Ortelius maps, and this is the first map depicting the Pacific Ocean. And this is Magellan's ship, the Victoria, and he had just come through the Straits of Magellan and thought, like Columbus did, that the sail would be about 3 days over to Japan, and instead it was 3 months. And the men starved, almost starved, and had to eat the leather off the yard arms. Finally, a Mercator map back here in the corner. These are all 1500, maps dated 1500, and they're all, as I've said before, original maps. Over here is Lord Admiral Horatio Nelson's flagship at Trafalgar. This model took a man 6,407 hours to build. There are 3,000 plates, copper plates on the hull. Each one has 20 little rivet holes. 60,000 operations in all. It took him 8 months just to put on the copper sheathing. All 4 gun decks are built out. There are flags in the flag lockers. There's furniture and paintings in Nelson's day cabin. And all the planking on the deck is original and individual. And it's an extremely fine model. This is the Battle of Trafalgar, in which Nelson's touch, his strategy was so unique and new to the world of naval warfare. He practically destroyed the French flagship on the first salvo, but unfortunately he caught a bullet through his chest, severed his spinal column, but he lived an hour and a half long enough to know that his strategy and his incredible genius won the Battle of Trafalgar and saved England from Napoleon's invasion that was already prepared. This is the clipper section of the exhibit. We call them the Greyhounds of the Sea. They were built so very narrow beams so they could travel very fast through the water and carried lots of sail. This particular ship is the Champion of the Seas. It was built by a seafarer that actually sailed aboard her and is clearly over 100 years old. It had many records. It was built by Donald Mackay, the famous clipper builder in Boston. Now, his competitor in New York was William H. Webb, and the Comet is the very famous ship that William H. Webb designed and built. And over here we have the mother map for the whole Gulf Coast, but principally for Texas, which shows the actual passages of the explorers to Soto, and it shows here Mission de los Tejas, spelled T-E-I-J-A-S, Establi. This is a French map, Establi in 1710, and this map was made in 1718, and that's the first time the word Texas appeared anywhere or ever was on a map. And this is the famous Guillaume de Lille map, and it's a very important map showing the rivers of Texas. This is the yacht section. This particular yacht is the Viking. It was a turn-of-the-century steam yacht, much like the yachts that all of the robber barons had, including J.P. Morgan. And as we look over here to the left, we see the little upstart schooner that started it all. It won the 100 Guineas race in 1851 around the Isle of Wight and established itself in England as the fact that the Americans were seamen. Won that race, and as we know, held that cup almost until the last few years. And this is the yacht America, and Queen Victoria came aboard her and was very impressed with how neat everything was and what fine sailors we had. And this is a picture of the race. It's a painting by Barnes. And over here we have the America's Cup winner in 1992, the America Cubed, and that 1992 goes all the way back to the Santa Maria in the other room, 1492, which is the 500 years that brings about the 5 centuries of mapping and shipping. This is the section that we call the mighty tugs. The tugboats, I'm standing here between 2 builders' models of 2 ocean-going tugboats. This one is the Typhoon that was used in the Falklands War to haul back one of the disabled vessels back to England. It's a powerful tug, 180 feet long. And this tug here is a Pacific tug, an offshore ocean-going tugboat. And over here we have a turn of the century, very Victorian in design, a Great Lakes harbor tug. This is the fishing and whaling section. This shrimp boat is in service down in Seabrook today. It was built by an engineer completely from scratch. He fashioned every single piece of material on this ship. It's beautifully done. You should look at it closely. This is a North Sea trawler, very familiar to people that have traveled in the North Sea. It's done by a very important international model maker. Here we have a whale ship with the 4 whalers and the stove there for melting and boiling the whale oil. It's a very fine model by Mr. Hitchcock. Here we have a diorama, a whaling scene, a whaler with the 6 men aboard. They've just harpooned the whale. This is the cargo ship section, both steam and diesel. And this particular ship is a turn-of-the-century turret deck steamer. The British built this ship in this unusual configuration to sort of alleviate the tariff going through the canals, because you calculate that by multiplying deck area times tonnage, and as you can see, they reduce the deck area. Here we have a Greek ship that is currently in service, and it is a cement carrier. This is the ocean liner section, and this particular period model of the Olympic, which was the sister of the Titanic, is a very nice model. The Olympic had a long and successful life as an Atlantic Ocean liner, and there's much history about the Olympic, which we will tell you about later on. This is the Mauretania, which actually was built before the Olympic or Titanic. It's one of the first liners built, it in the Aquitania, and it held the Blue Riband, which was the record for crossing the Atlantic in the shortest length of time. It held it for 20 years, followed by the Queen Mary, and then our gorgeous United States that was launched in 1952 held the Blue Riband up until recently. The United States languishes away in a harbor near Philadelphia and is waiting for America to rediscover its greatest maritime achievement. The United States, probably 1,000 feet long, traveled at one time as fast as 45 to 47 miles per hour. It's been a pleasure discussing our exhibit, Origins and Influence, 500 Years of Shipping and Mapping, from my wife and my collection. And we also appreciate very much your coming to the Museum of Southern History, and we hope that you'll come many times again to see the wonderful exhibits here.